Let's get started. I want to introduce Brett Axler. He's the head of live technical launch management at Netflix. He and I are going to sit down and we're going to talk about what it's like for Netflix to tackle live as part of their operations. So Brett, if you could join me. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I think it's been an interesting journey to watch a very established video company become a live video company. I think everybody in this room knows the challenges of live. You certainly know the challenges of live. It's not something the consumer is necessarily as aware of. But let's sort of start at the beginning a little bit and talk about those early days. What did the early phases of dipping toes into the water with live look like? And sort of compare it to where you've come to now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think something to preface as well is, Netflix started their live journey about 3 years ago. And I've been lucky to be a part of it for about the past year and a half. If you want to dive deeper specifically into a lot of like the early days, there is a fantastic team of folks who literally were the ones to start from day one. And they've been publishing a tech blog series on the Netflix tech blog that goes through like exactly what those days looked like. At a high level, yes, to your point, Netflix has been streaming in the realm of SVOD for well over a decade. And I think that's one of the almost benefits to start is that they weren't really starting from zero when it came to live streaming. They were starting from experience. One of the best parts of it is Netflix uniquely owns and operates their own CDN that they crafted from scratch, OpenConnect. It's a amazing platform. It already distributes to hundreds of countries around the world. And it's something that they had to start from, when they started working on live, they needed to figure out how were they going to leverage that existing platform to be able to distribute live video. There was the other half of it, of course, which was video signal acquisition, which is super interesting because for a lot of us here, that's our bread and butter. We've been doing signal acquisition for years. And it was quite interesting coming in about a year and a half in, and along with some of my coworkers here today, that we looked at what some of that signal acquisition infrastructure was, and we're like, there's probably a better way to do this. There is a better way to do this. However, it was nice being able to discuss with a lot of these, PhDs and these amazing engineers that spent their entire career building one of the world's best streaming platforms, and see how they would want to go ahead and do it. And we've definitely, between the early days of the Chris Rock comedy special and what they had to do to prepare for that event, and running fiber into a very old theater in the middle of Baltimore with a total lack of infrastructure, and then, flashing forward to where we just did this past year with the NFL, where we had to broadcast from multiple stadiums around the country. It's been a pretty wild ride for a couple of years.
What's the velocity look like in the year and a half you've been there? Sort of when you started, how many were you doing in a given week versus now?
Oh yeah. Well, I will say it was a very interesting change of pace. Prior to me joining Netflix, I had been working with a company where we were running almost 10,000 linear channels 24/7, and then came to Netflix, and on my very first day I sat down with our leadership team and I was like, cool, when's our next event? And they were like, we got one in a week and a half. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, we got time. They're like, no, we don't have a lot of time. We need to get started. And we were doing basically one event a week, sometimes maybe even just one event a month. And the phase that they were in, which was really interesting, it wasn't that long ago, it was only about a year and a half ago, they were working on basically what they referred to as low profile events. And it's these just fantastic small events that are not heavily advertised, that we are able to basically use as tests, not just for technology, but also for
the people too, presumably.
The operations. And one of the first things that I had learned coming in, working with the team, and again, these are all brilliant professionals, and these are all folks that built this amazing platform, and I was looking up to them from day one, and then we got into the operation, and then they would all turn and look at our team and be like, okay, how do we do this? And in reality, in the time, I mean, day one, this is literally a year and a half into the journey, we didn't have comms panels. We didn't have, specifically speaking about the Netflix side of things, we still, of course, had our third-party partners that we would work with for signal acquisition and all of the, things that we would have to do to amend the feed prior to it entering Netflix. But we'd be legitimately just opening up like Zoom rooms and trying to communicate with large number of software engineers through Zoom.
Right.
And,
so you sort of had to teach like Netflix engineering how to run ops and
exactly
how to have open channels and
exactly.
comms.
And that's been, it actually has been one of the most unique challenges, but also one of the most rewarding challenges has been educating, these, being able to work with and educate software engineers and all of the amazing engineers that we're working with on how to operate at scale. And back to your original question, I think that's been the interesting journey, is that just a year and a half ago, we were doing an event a week or an event a month, and now we're doing, on our least busiest week, we're doing 3 events a week. On our busiest week, we're doing 7 to 9 events a week, and that's going to continue scaling.
Right, and those are all global events, presumably.
Exactly, and that, so talking about that specifically right now is all of our operations are run from the United States. We have operation centers here in Los Angeles, we have them up in Los Gatos, but it's all United States based. However, we have a partnership with WWE where they travel the world. So we've had a handful of events that have come in from Saudi Arabia, which also means that we need to, fortunately we're partnering with WWE to ensure that they're managing a successful backhaul of that media to Stamford, Connecticut, where we can pick it up, and they help us beyond there. But then on our part, that also means we need to work with our ops teams, our incident response management teams, and all the engineers that support live to work some, seemingly chaotic hours to manage those events.
Let's talk about sort of some of that operational readiness. Like when it comes to one of these big live events, not maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's one of the other things in your workload. What does it take? Like, who are you coordinating with on engineering and product side? What's the comms look like? Like, who are the people you're having to be in touch with, and what are the touch points, both sort of in the lead up and then in the moment, look like?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think our team specifically, so the team that I work with, we're called the Live Technical Launch Managers, and it's a weird term that is not very broadly used across the industry, and that's because basically the foundation of our team is we are there to facilitate communications between everybody. We have obviously our fantastic broadcast engineers and operations folks who manage everything, up to the edge of Netflix. We've got folks in our live streaming technologies team who manage, the encoding and the bitrate ladders and delivering everything to the origin, and of course our CDN folks, and of course all the cloud services in between. But there's a lot of different teams that need to know exactly what's going on, what are the expectations ahead of an event, what makes this event, uniquely different from the last, what are the risks. So our team ultimately communicates with everybody. We like to say that we're the air traffic controllers. Ultimately, if we didn't exist, odds are things would, if we didn't exist for a couple minutes, odds are things would function. Things would keep flying. People would be able to land. However, as soon as you start having traffic jams, or as soon as you have something, run into trouble, that's where you would suddenly have people that wouldn't know how to communicate and where to talk and how to reach out. And that's where we have to partner with all those individual teams to help facilitate before, during, and after the show.
And presumably there's a lot of lead up to those events and coordination that goes on, presumably even weeks in advance. Oh, yeah. in as part of the planning for it. What is the sort of coming out of them? How are you capturing lessons learned, and how are you making changes for the next big event down the line?
How do you like spreadsheets? I don't love spreadsheets, but it's been.
I like them more than PowerPoint decks.
There you go. Yeah. It's been an interesting journey because I think there's a handful of different. I know we'll talk about incident response management. That's a separate topic, but in terms of the way that we capture right now, a lot of it has to do with just general documentation, and I think we're always seeking better ways of doing it. It really is a pain, obviously, to try to capture hundreds of data points of what it takes to launch a show, especially something as complex as NFL on Christmas. But a lot of that is, how do we capture everything into, whether it's a spreadsheet or whether it's into a document, how do we hold regular check-ins with everybody, and how do we also not be a pain to all of our partners? We're kind of like, at times, one of the most loved and depended upon teams, but also one of the most annoying, because we're always reaching reaching out, can you please provide an update? Can you please provide an update? But these are updates that are critical, and it's been interesting trying to work with folks on both extreme ends of the platform where they don't have, best visibility at times into the other end of the platform. So an example would be, we recently were discussing, what if we were to run an event at 50p? And it's like, okay, well, on the surface, yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. It's just another frame rate. That's fine. We'll just go ahead and run 50p. In reality, though, we had to sit down with virtually a dozen teams to discuss, well, okay, is that something that the show site can do? Is that something that all of our third-party partners that are going to help transport and augment the signal, are they going to be able to handle that? Talking to everybody on our player UI, the player teams and the CDN teams, like, does it change anything at all and impact them in any way? And that's where we had to sit down and do, basically look, okay, we're 3 weeks out. What type of testing do we have to do? We're going to need to identify an event that we're actually going to have to test live to ensure that we're not going to break something really odd and little that inevitably is going to be catastrophic if we run at a new frame rate that we haven't tried before. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just capturing that information, communicating it out, and hopefully moving forward, we don't have to repeat the same test twice.
Right, absolutely. You mentioned incident response, and let's sort of go back to that one, because what you were talking about there, those little issues can escalate very quickly as part of it. So what does the response management process look like when you're in the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So Netflix historically has actually been well known for their incident response management and some of what they like to call, I think it's been quoted as chaos engineering, to really create, the amazing platform that they have. Molly Strove, one of our engineering managers, just published an awesome article a couple weeks ago that discusses kind of the history of Netflix's incident response management. And it's been an amazing year and a half working with those teams, because there's teams at Netflix who have been doing this for years, and they've continued to refine the process, implementing tools like Incident.io and Slack integrated paging, PagerDuty, and things like that to be able to help improve the process. I think the big difference is, though, when our team came in early in live, was that most of the time, broad statement, most people don't have catastrophic outages. It happens occasionally. We all know inevitably it happens on any platform. You're going to have something catastrophic, but it usually has to be a chain of events, and you always prepare for that day. Live is uniquely different. Even the tiniest little thing, like a forklift driver driving over a fiber line running between the head end and the OB truck, can be catastrophic. And
is that a specific event that happened?
No, that is definitely something that we joked about a couple of times when trying to describe to our teams that, hey, like, we can't plan for everything. Like, we can't control everything. We can at least plan how we'll react to it. But it definitely, it's been an interesting time basically training our teams, not only training the folks that operate the shows, but also training all of the cross-functional product and tech teams that have to support. Their systems need to be reliable enough to support these shows. And one of the big conversations that our leadership was having last year, months ahead of NFL, was, hey, typically during Christmas, our teams have a quiet period. Usually things are quiet, we don't push anything new, it's a relaxing couple of weeks, we let people be home with their families. Well, this time we're launching the biggest event we've ever done on Netflix in the middle of the holidays. So how are we going to
Quiet doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. So how are we going to plan for that? And that's where we legitimately had to go through that's where we start creating things like monitoring by exception and ensuring that we have, very quick acknowledging times with our engineers so they can get online and support, and also ensure early alerting. Don't be alerted. Don't wait for the alert to come in. We should already know that there's an issue so we can already start working on it. And it's been an iterative process over the past year, working with a lot of engineers who are not used to working in a live environment with, you don't have 2 to 5 minutes to fix this. You've got seconds before it goes live.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest difference, I think, for the existing Netflix that was there before your time around building that new muscle to change into a live platform as well. What are some of the other internal shifts outside of the engineering having to respond and support differently? Like, you've sort of been there now for a bulk of the big change that's been going on, and what does that shift look like on the inside as sort of you were an outsider that is now in there building it? What does that look like?
It's been interesting. It's been really rewarding to watch. It's been really exciting to see how we've grown from doing an event a week to doing, a very, very large number of back-to-back events. But it's also been really fun to see the ramp down where, a year ago when we, even up till, last November, December, when we were doing any given event whatsoever, it felt like everybody in the company knew that we were doing it. It was the biggest news. It was the talk of the town. Everybody was really excited. And then January rolled around and we got hit by this wall that we were expecting and went very well with WWE, where that train starts and it never stops. We do WWE a minimum of 3 nights a week and sometimes 5, and it's incredible. However, give it 2 months into this year, and now it's non-news. And one of the best compliments I think that our team has received all year was from one of our principal engineers who's been with the company a very long time. That poor guy, good on him. He spent years operating the shows himself. Like, this is a person that spent all day, every day designing the systems, building the systems, being a foundational member of the way that Netflix works. And he would jump on and be part of the operations of the shows. Now, flash forward to 2025, I think he's been on maybe 3 shows the entire year. And I sit next to him, and legitimately his response was, "We had a show yesterday." And I'm like, yes, like, we had 2.8 million people watching and you didn't know. That makes me happy. It means, it didn't make the news. Nothing broke. It didn't make the news. That's been a fun process.
Have there been less subtle changes? I mean, that one is to me a relatively big one that it's become sort of de rigueur that you can have such events going on. But have there been less obvious differences between supporting the VOD platform and the live that have been part of the culture shift at Netflix?
I think Netflix has a pretty stable culture, which has been interesting. I think if you go online and you read the Netflix culture memo, we're definitely we're a company that focuses heavily on open candor and not being afraid to break things. Ultimately, I love that one of the key terms that our co-CEOs say all the time is we suck compared to where we're going to be in the future, and it's been something that I think. Maybe a subtle shift would be is that when we all came in on the live side, there's been this massive influx of people that were hired for live, and it's been a lot of fun to work with all of our cross-functional teams to be able to build these teams of people that are made up from all of these other companies. There's people that come from legacy broadcast, people from the other streaming providers, people that come from even just like live events, and folks like myself that spent years operating a mic in conferences like this. And it was interesting trying to mesh all those new folks into the existing culture and understanding this, like, hey, it's not always we're just going to go buy something off the shelf, or it's not always we're going to do this here the same way that we did it everywhere else. Let's actually sit down and discuss, and what we call farm for dissent. If we want to bring up a new idea, even something as simple as integrating a new tool or system, we want to get everybody's input. And it's been really fun and rewarding to see how the engineers from other companies coming in have started to lean into the Netflix culture and have started to realize some of the benefits of, if we want to work with a third-party system, if we've always worked with a very similar visualization platform for monitoring in every other place, and we want to go deploy it here, it's not as simple as, okay, let's just go call them up and deploy it. No, we need to go speak to all of our engineering teams, and part of that process may actually be one of those engineering teams says, hey, actually, we have this fantastic tool that we built a couple of years ago that might be able to do it ourselves. And being able to call that team up, sit down with them, and actually iterate on the process and really build it from scratch and do something a better way. But alternatively, then also needing to sometimes convince the engineering teams that redesigning a Riedel panel is not the best use of our time.
Right,
we should probably, just go purchase the Riedel panel. So
right, you can build it, but should you build it?
Exactly.
Becomes part of that conversation. Describe a little bit of the command center. What's your war room look like, as you're getting ready for a major event? I think we all have a picture of it in our head, but help fill in the gaps for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 different locations currently that we operate out of. We have our broadcast operations center, which is located here in Los Angeles. One of our designers is in the room, Mayval. And that location is all for, say, signal acquisition and ensuring that we have all the correct SCUDdy markers and languages, a lot of the verification of everything that comes into Netflix. I like to say that basically that room handles everything until the handoff of basically the finished package on the origin server. And then you have the live command center up in Los Gatos, which has more of a bird's eye view of the entire end-to-end. And what in the live command center, the interesting part is just because of the excitement at Netflix, we've had a lot of executive presence in the room with us over the past couple of years. So what happens is in the weeks leading up to an event, for example, we have an event coming up, I believe it's next week, the Six Kings tennis tournament. We're spending a lot of time right now sitting down with all of our cross-functional product and tech teams, understanding what are the unique elements of that show, what are the risks, what are any new features that we're doing, what's the expected audience, so we can figure out, scaling, is this something that's going to put our systems to the test, and then what we'll have to do is actually, perform any testing ahead of time, anything that changes, such as doing something in a new format that we haven't done before. And then finally, in the day of, after we've gone through rehearsals and transmission checks and everything else, this is where it gets really interesting because, especially in a live command center, we have a large mix of both folks that understand the broadcast world and folks that may not understand the broadcast world but are, brilliant in their own regard in Netflix and how Netflix works. So sitting next to each other, it's a lot of fun where, I come from broadcast, but the person sitting next to me is somebody that may understand exactly the health and what the current status is of every Open Connect unit across the entire planet and has that visualization down to a single box in Portugal that may be oversubscribed. And being able to have that open dialogue with them, hey, this is what we're seeing right now, could you please dive into this? And also it's been amazing on the executive side, having them in the room as well, where, at other companies that I've worked for, if there was an executive in the room at times, I feel like, things would, people would react a little differently. People would be concerned. In our case, our executives are some of the most supportive people in the world. They sit in the back row with us, and they're there to support us in every way possible. And it's nice because sometimes they even, think through, hey, this is what we're hearing from the comms team right now. This is what we're hearing on social media. We might want to dig into this. And it really is a collaborative environment, and even something where, elephant in the room, Tyson Paul, like it was a collaborative environment the entire night, and it was one where we all sat there and we worked through, everything that we were seeing. And I appreciate that as tense as a control room can be, the LCC, as we call it, Live Command Center, it's 100% always a blameless environment, and it's always a collaborative environment where we're all, we know we're in this together, we know we're working towards the same goal here. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you've got all the right SMEs in the room to help solve the problems, and then it's great that the leaders are there to support, but they're also kind of staying out of the way and not necessarily pushing an agenda as part of what's going on.
100%, yeah.
It's great. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the sort of the key inflection points, whether they were successful or painful, that have defined, what goes into your life playbook now that you're writing in real time.
Well, we could talk about the distance of time between Tyson Paul and Christmas last year.
I would imagine that was a busy period.
It was a busy period. I don't know a single person that didn't work 7 days a week. It was fun. It was a great time. But honestly, it was a ride coming out of it, because I will admit, in every capacity, we were from an operations standpoint, we learned a lot coming out of Tyson Paul. Primarily, leaving the technology aside, from an operational standpoint, one of the biggest things that we learned was Netflix has this open culture of, if you see something, say something. Anybody is supposed to open up an incident report. Anybody is supposed to file a ticket if they see something. Reach out on Slack. We're very accessible. We being, say, the broadcast operations center and the live command center. Reach out to us and let us know if you see something. We love to know about these things because we can look into the telemetry and see what's going on. So we appreciate the feedback. Tyson Paul was a different story. When you have 60-some million concurrent viewers, including all of our own people internally at Netflix watching, inevitably you're going to find things, and you're going to get a lot of reports. And that evening, we were bombarded with a lot of information coming in internally, and anybody across the entire company was allowed to post and let us know what was going on. And myself and a handful of coworkers were managing all those communications, and we basically we could not handle the amount that was coming at us all at once. We were broken.
And that was just internally.
That was just internally. Yeah, exactly. So we had, hundreds and hundreds of messages coming in. Hey, I see this, and it was putting systems to the test. So one of the very first things that we did after the fact was figure, okay, how do we still keeping this open communication within the Netflix culture. How do we allow people to communicate with us, but within moderation? And how do we, keep our channels open for communication without potentially risking their failure?
Reduce the noise.
Exactly, reduce the noise. So that took a lot of time, definitely figuring out how we communicated after the NFL. Unfortunately, we've now since done a number of very large events, and we've had very successful communications. The other thing that we did, which is even more fun, was there's a fantastic engineering director on our team that he created something called the Netflix Anxiety Closet after Tyson Paul. And this anxiety closet, the thought behind this process was we were all nervous going into NFL. Of course, we were nervous before Tyson Paul going into NFL. It's the first big event at Netflix. Let's do this. We want to make sure we hit this out of the park for our members. So what we did was we had just literally a document that was called Netflix's anxiety closet, basically, or it might have been Dave's anxiety closet. And anytime we thought of anything, we would throw it in that document. And we had hundreds of entries from across the company, down to legitimately some of our coworkers here in LA. We were like, well, what happens if Alo and Tyler both eat bad sushi the night before and suddenly are too sick to run the show the next morning? We're like, cool, done. You two are not allowed to have the same dinner that night. You're even going in separate Ubers to the broadcast operations center that morning. But it got to the point where we were able to basically create if-then run books for everything, and it even got down to the funny. I think the final funny note ahead of NFL was we really did intend to try to plan for everything. There were a couple coworkers on my team. We had gotten on the phone with PG&E up in the Bay Area to figure out, hey, what power grid are we on? And is my house, that I live about 5 minutes from the office, is my house on a separate power grid? What are the odds that both of those power grids go down? And I legitimately that day got on the phone with my wife and I'm like, hey, honey, just a heads up, on Christmas, be prepared, we might end up having an influx of people in our house if we lose power at lose power and our backup generator at the command center, because we might operate from our house. So just trying to think of everything that could possibly happen.
That sounds like an interesting document. Does it still exist, and is it still being added to?
Oh yes. It's been, we have a multitude of documents now and different ways that we'll approach per event. I think that's the most interesting part, though, because I remember having a conversation with our leadership team last year that some of my biggest concerns from the start were not operating our largest events. My personal concerns were the random Tuesday night WWE NXT event where it's just a handful of people operating the show. It should be business as usual, copy paste. That's going to be the night that we have a massive problem, and it's going to take longer to get people online. It's going to take longer to diagnose the issue
because nobody's ready for it.
Exactly. So that's where, to this day, I would say that still is my primary focus. So I think that's where, from a documentation and readiness standpoint, there is separate ways of looking at it, and that's something that our team's been really pushing right now to develop better processes for those smaller events, because there is scale in terms of number of viewers. When you have a massive event with 20 million plus concurrents, we all have eyes on it. Now we need to think about it as scale in terms of number of events that we're doing per week and number of feeds during those events, and how do we manage incident response management and readiness for those complexities.
So let's talk international a little bit around that. Obviously, we've talked about some events that are big international anyway. You said everything is being managed out of U.S., out of LA and Los Gatos. How are you sort of handling the technical and partnership complexities around supporting a massive live event that's in another market?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's a couple different ways of looking at it. I think right now, the bulk of our events at the moment are in the United States. They all, we actually put them on here. We acquire the signals here. However, we do already distribute all of that content internationally for the most part. It depends on the rights per event.
Sure.
We already distribute, to all those countries, which is fantastic. That's already a huge part of the equation that is solved. On the signal acquisition side, and also managing things like language barriers and working with folks in other countries, I think some events are easier to plan for than others. WWE, for example, they're already in. They already do their European tours. They do tours in in other places around the world. And for the most part, the partnership there is not for the most part. The partnership there is fantastic, and for the most part, it's easy to acquire those signals because they are dealing with most of the production in those countries, and then they're backhauling it. We pick it up in the United States. In a similar manner, we have World Baseball Classic coming up next March, where games will be taking
That's in Tokyo?
Tokyo, but their games are being played all over the world. I think there's about 4 cities, I believe, that it's being played in. However, that's an area where we've leveraged our MLB partnerships, and MLB is a United States-based company. They have infrastructure in Secaucus, and that's one of those ones where the hardest part for us really is grabbing the feeds from Secaucus and then managing some of the more chaotic around-the-clock operations times when the actual shows are happening, when the games are happening. But yeah, for the most part, it's not like we're actually going out at the moment and needing to partner with connectivity providers at the stadiums in Tokyo, for example. So it's something that we're going to have to lean into as we continue to grow.
That'll be part of your evolution.
Always, yeah, and that's something where I think partnering with companies around the world will continue to, and it's nice because Netflix is already a global company. We already do produce content in a lot of foreign countries, so we already do have some pretty strong relationships. And now it's leveraging, instead of the production side, now it's leveraging some of the, say, live production side and some of the transport side.
I would imagine that means expanding your partnerships in the local production areas as well, because those tend to be sometimes there's big global companies that are managing it, but often with those regional productions, there might be someone that have to bring in and adapt to your systems and your processes as part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be something that, as whatever the plans have in store, we'll have to approach each of those markets differently.
Are there, as you're building it, obviously you've brought a lot of legacy muscle into so that they understand how live works, but what is some of the new tooling that maybe the Netflix side has been able to bring and show you based on the telemetry or observability or other pieces? Because I would imagine there's a whole host of things that you might not have had in other organizations that you've worked at.
That is one of the coolest things about the way that Netflix is built and the way that Netflix operates right now is ultimately we own and operate end to end. We have full visibility into what the health is of every single one of those systems. So from a telemetry standpoint, to your point, we're able to drill down and figure out. One of my favorite examples is I personally was in the hot seat running an event. It was WrestleMania back a handful of months ago, and I was taking a look at just our health metrics. Everything looked stable, and I saw that we just had a very small blip of errors in Portugal. And as we continued to drill down further, as it turns out, there was an ISP. It was midnight in Portugal at that time. There was an ISP that must have pushed an update and had unrouted basically a handful of our customers from our local IX. And we basically, those customers, for a short period in time, weren't actually able to easily access our servers. And I feel like when you're working with a CDN in general, if you don't own and have, deep visibility into that CDN, like we do, it's a little bit more challenging to put the puzzle pieces together in real time like that to figure out exactly what is happening. We don't have the option to say, fail over to another CDN. We are the CDN, so it is something that we need to use the telemetry that we have available in our arsenal to look into, what are we going to do for failover? How do we restart those sessions? What can we do to support those customers?
Are there, as you think about that tooling and the other elements that are going into it, is that driving changes to the user experience that you guys are thinking about as we think about sort of the next year of Netflix and what it looks like? Like, are you thinking of new features and new elements that go into it, or are you thinking still more about scale and expanding the support globally for the work that you're doing? Like, what is next ultimately for your team, I guess?
For our team specifically, operations. It is how do we scale our operations? And to the point of something like new features, like we had announced that we're doing Star Search next year, which of course involves things like voting features. And there's the technical ramifications there that need to be tested. And then on our side, there's also the operations, where just something as seemingly simple as voting, for example, it could take a dozen different teams to ensure that voting works correctly. And of course, there's other elements that need to be built into that, like game show rules and things like that to ensure that it actually is stable and what you're seeing is realistic. So from our team's standpoint, we're really thinking through how do we operate that at scale without also just scaling people indefinitely. So some of the biggest things I would say that we're working on right now are things like monitoring by exception, figuring out how we improve our automated alerting, self-healing and failovers, things like that, because right now it might take a handful of people operationally to get the show off the ground on a nightly basis for something simple. However, when we're running 6, 10, 15 shows at the exact same time, we don't just want to continue hiring people indefinitely. Let's use, let's work smarter, not harder, and let's build out tools and systems that are going to allow, say, a single operator to be able to monitor and control multiple shows at once. And we're basically working on a handful of different, things that we see in other NOCs and other operations, different types of tiering systems where inevitably you're going to have humans in the mix to be able to interact, but you also should have, work from minimum, and then also have points of escalation where people are able to quickly reach out to your incident response managers, your experts who are going to be able to step in to be able to help start putting the fire out. And, it's going to be an interesting process as we continue to scale.
As you scale, are you also expanding outside the North American footprint? Are you going to have a sort of follow the sun mentality around how you're doing live ops?
It's something that we definitely are going to have to look into. Already we can see that, like with World Baseball Classic, we're going to have operators working some pretty gnarly hours in California. So it's something that we'll have to continue to assess as as we see what our content teams in Hollywood throw our way.
What should we come to expect in the next year as things can continue to expand Netflix? We talked about velocity early on, and you went from a couple of events a week, maybe if you were lucky, maybe a month. What does that velocity look like over the next year? Are you doing multiple events a day and out of the facility and multiple different types of events that are going on? Is that just continuing to increase and expand?
Yeah, I think a handful of things visually. I think on the outside, it's going to continue. We'll continue seeing what the content slate. We've announced a large content slate. We know what's coming up next year. We also, of course, are building towards the Women's World Cup in 2027. So that'll definitely be something that we need to build our operations towards, and also ensure that we build the capacity to be able to handle the member size there that wants to stream that live. Behind the scenes, we obviously have a lot going on. We need to build out our operations. We need to continue building better tooling and alerting, monitoring systems, et cetera. And then of course we're going to have additional features on the way. We already mentioned voting and other elements that we're going to have to start testing and figuring out. As content's always coming up with new ideas, and as they bring us these new ideas, we need to figure out engineering timelines for anybody who works in a software engineering org. It's not a quick, couple week long turnaround. Sometimes it's months or quarters out, if not years out. So we need to spend time working with those teams now to identify what are our goals in 2027, even to ensure that we can allocate the engineering resources to build out that functionality.
Yeah, I would imagine you're touching so many different types of players across so many different types of devices that, particularly when you talk about that interactive functionality, adding it in is not a trivial task. So there's a lot of testing that has to go in, but then you have to be able to have it deployed so that you can find that moment to test it before you have the scale moment.
Absolutely, and that's where I think it's really interesting too, because Netflix being around for as long as it's been around as an SVOD streaming provider, we have a lot of different versions of Netflix. We've got millions of devices, hundreds of millions of devices at this point that people can use to log on and watch Netflix, and ensuring that we are able to actually serve the content to those devices. Luckily, we have all that data and we're able to work on that, but we need to spend time with these teams to understand if we roll out this new feature, or if we roll this change out, or if we're doing something like broadcasting, streaming in a format that we haven't tried before, how many of those devices is it going to break? And that's something that a lot of the times our team in operations, we need to work with all the cross-functional partners to get that data and help them understand what the risks are associated with any type of new rollout.
Got it. What's the near term look like for you? What's the next big event that you're worried about and that you're checking the anxiety list to see what needs to be solved? Like what are you going to have to get away from here and start thinking about that we should be looking at and thinking about all of the background that went into making it happen?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have our next big fight coming up on November 14th. And then, of course, we have the Christmas games again this year. So operationally, I would say they're not going to be massively different from the way that we've handled the past few events, which has been great. Anxiety-wise, I would say I tend to be a fairly not anxious person. I try not to. I think looking at our team, I really try to maybe be one of the more positive ones. At least I hope that way. I've got a couple people on my team here. I have no idea if they're laughing at me or not.
They are.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Only expect that. But I think I tend to try to come at it from a positive twist, because I think at times we have plenty of people that they'll start filling what are our current concerns, whether that is if we're rolling out things like DAI and other types of features that we need to test. They'll start being concerned going into these events. From my perspective, my team's perspective, we're the air traffic controllers. We're not the ones flying the plane, but we are the ones that are responsible to make sure that the runway is clear, and we have, we're reporting on the weather so that we're not, we're giving everybody else a heads up, based on what we're seeing. So I'm not really overly concerned about these next couple events. I'm actually really, really excited to see full circle how far we've come.
I guess these will be the first times that so these will be like the first massive repeat events that you've had going on. So it's sort of like proof points. Is everything set and baked the way that you want it to come off?
Exactly. And something I would love to see out of Christmas this year is, last year we had about 300 people online supporting. That doesn't include anybody in the stadiums or anybody that was helping acquire the signal. But we had about 300 people online just at Netflix that were helping support that operation. I would love to get that number down this year. I would really love to see our teams work more efficiently, and that'll be a big milestone across this year to ensure that we get more people that can be home and enjoy Christmas with their families, and we can do as the operations do. One of the big things that I've continued to work with, to express to a lot of our engineering partners on our team specifically, has been, why is it that our team exists? What is it about, at Netflix, why we have this live technical launch management team, and not very commonly used term across the industry? Ultimately, we are here to try to help, get all the folks that design and engineer all of these other tools and things that make Netflix work, keep them doing what they do best. We want them well rested. We want them waking up in the morning, sipping their coffee, and get to coding, get to focus on what they do best. And on our side, we'll take care of the operations. But the thing is that it's a partnership. It's not something that we can just magically take over their systems. I like to say we're, in a lot of ways, another analogy, we're kind of paramedics. There's no way that we're going to be the surgeons. You can at least train us and bring us up to speed on what to do to put things on ice, at least for seconds, until we can get people online to assist. But being able to build out these tools and build out these automated processes that allow these other engineering teams to sleep well at night, to understand that they're in good hands with the operations teams, things should function the way they function. It takes time to get there, but we're already getting there. We're already running. We've run over 150 events this year alone, of which most of those events we have not had more than a couple dozen people online to support, and it'll be really exciting when we get to the point where we are running, say, 5, 10, 15 events in a single day. That'll be coming quick, I'm sure, and to not have to have engineering teams online to support that'll be fully operated by a combination of the humans in the operations centers, as well as the excellent back-end tools and everything, alerting systems and self-healing systems that'll be able to keep things functioning the way they should be.
Awesome. Well, Brett, thank you so much for sort of just a snapshot of where you guys have evolved and like the things that are coming as you sort of mature the system over the next year. It's fascinating, and I feel like I'll look at the next live event that I watch on Netflix in a different way, knowing all of the eyeballs that are involved in keeping it operational.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
That's all.